The rain came down hard at Fort Campbell, turning the 2nd Brigade motor pool into a study of gray steel and darker intentions. It was 0630 on a Monday morning in March 2024, and 36 infantry soldiers stood in formation beside their Humvees, waiting to see if their new platoon leader would break. Staff Sergeant Rhett Maddox made sure his voice carried across the concrete. "Your daddy earning that uniform, ma'am. You're just wearing it." First Lieutenant Cassidy Brennan stood perfectly still. Water dripped off her patrol cap, ran down the collar of her combat uniform, pooled in her boots. She was 28 years old, 5'7", built like a distance runner who'd learned to carry weight. Her face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, strong jawline, dark brown eyes that tracked everything and gave back nothing. A thin white scar ran from her right eyebrow into her hairline, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. She wore the standard Army combat uniform with first lieutenant bars on her chest, crossed rifles for infantry branch, and a ranger tab on her left shoulder that she'd earned through 62 days of controlled suffering. Her right shoulder bore the 82nd Airborne Combat Patch. Proof she'd deployed. Proof she'd led soldiers in places where mistakes became body bags. 20 years of expectation and doubt collapsed into this single moment. Every soldier watching to see if the daughter of Medal of Honor recipient or Colonel Garrett Brennan would respond to disrespect or pretend she hadn't heard it. She keyed her radio handset. "Alpha 26 to Alpha 21. Radio check over." The response came back clean. She moved to the next frequency without looking at Maddox, without acknowledging his existence, running her communications check like his words had been nothing but wind and rain. First Sergeant Dutch Kowalski stood 30 feet away, granite-faced and silent. At 58 years old, he'd spent 35 years in the Army and had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved with a dull knife and bad intentions. 2 Iraq deployments, 1 Afghanistan, scars on his hands from shrapnel and burns from a vehicle fire in Fallujah that should have killed him. He'd been there when Colonel Garrett Brennan died, had been the first sergeant in Brennan's vehicle convoy when the IED detonated outside Fallujah in 2005, had tried to pull Brennan from the burning wreckage while rounds cooked off and fuel burned hot enough to melt steel. Kowalski saw Cassidy standing there in the rainwater, streaming down her face, and saw Garrett Brennan's eyes staring back at him across 20 years of guilt and grief. He was already moving toward Maddox with violence in his step. Cassidy Brennan had been 9 years old when 2 officers in dress blues knocked on the door of their base housing at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November 2005. She'd been doing homework at the kitchen table, struggling with long division, when she heard her mother answer the door. She heard her mother make a sound. Not a scream, not a cry, just a sound like all the air had been punched out of her lungs at once. Cassidy came around the corner and saw her mother on her knees, saw the 2 officers standing there with their hats in their hands and their faces carefully blank, saw the chaplain behind them, already moving forward to catch her mother before she collapsed completely. Colonel Garrett Brennan, battalion commander, Ranger 3-time combat veteran, had been killed by an improvised explosive device outside Fallujah, Iraq. He'd been leading a mounted patrol that got ambushed. The lead vehicle hit an IED, 4 soldiers wounded, 2 critically. Colonel Brennan, dismounted under fire, ran forward to help them. The secondary IED detonated when he reached them. 14 soldiers survived that day because Garrett Brennan ran toward the explosion instead of away from it. He didn't. They gave him the Medal of Honor posthumously. They gave Cassidy a folded flag, a gold star pin for her mother to wear, and a shadow she would carry for the next 20 years. Her mother remarried when Cassidy was 12. A good man named Robert Sinclair, a defense contractor who'd worked with her father on logistics projects. Someone who tried to be a father but could never fill that space because the space wasn't empty. It was occupied by a ghost who wore dress blues and taught his daughter to shoot when she was 6 years old. Cassidy grew up driven by something she couldn't name. She excelled at everything: academics, athletics, leadership, not because she enjoyed it, but because she needed to prove something to a memory that never answered back. She got into West Point at 17, graduated top 15% of her class in 2018. Commissioned infantry in the first class where women were authorized in combat arms branches. Got assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division as a platoon leader at 22 years old. But everyone who learned her name made the connection. Brennan, like Colonel Garrett Brennan, like the Medal of Honor recipient, like the legend who died leading from the front. And then came the assumptions. She only got here because of her name. They went easy on her. Special treatment, legacy admission. So at 23 years old, during her second year as a platoon leader, she volunteered for Ranger School. 19 women started in her class. 3 graduated. Cassidy was one of them, but it took her 2 tries. She got recycled once during mountain phase when she failed a patrol due to a navigation error. Came back crushed it the second time, earned her tab through 62 days of sleep deprivation, starvation, and psychological warfare that broke stronger candidates. She patrolled through Georgia's swamps with hypothermia. She led missions on 3 hours of sleep over 5 days. She carried rucksacks that weighed nearly half her body weight up mountains in the rain. She was one of 3 women out of 19 who refused to quit. She wore her Ranger tab every day after that. Some soldiers respected it. Others whispered she'd gotten special treatment, that the instructors had gone easy, that women had different standards even though they didn't. Then came Afghanistan in 22. Her platoon got attached to a special forces team for village clearing operations in Paktia province. The mission went bad in the first 30 seconds. Complex ambush from 3 sides, heavy machine gun fire, RPGs impacting close enough to throw dirt and shrapnel across their position. The radio operator next to her took rounds through the chest and dropped without making a sound. Forward element pinned down with 2 casualties bleeding out. No comms with higher headquarters. No close air support on station. Just Cassidy and 32 soldiers in a kill zone designed to slaughter them. She took command. Organized defensive fire called an air support on a secondary radio frequency she had to dig out of the dead RTO's vest, and led a counter-assault that broke the ambush through pure violence of action. 11 American soldiers survived because 23-year-old Second Lieutenant Cassidy Brennan kept her head when everyone else was losing theirs. They put her in for a Silver Star. It got downgraded to Bronze Star with V device after a lengthy awards review process. Not necessarily because of gender bias, but because the reviewing officer felt the actions didn't quite meet the gallantry threshold, didn't quite rise to the level of conspicuous valor. She accepted it, locked it in a drawer, never mentioned it unless someone asked directly, because medals didn't erase doubt. Respect did. And she was still earning it, one skeptical soldier at a time, one day at a time, knowing that her father's name opened doors, but also set expectations she could never quite reach. Now she was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky with 2nd Platoon Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 187th Infantry Regiment. She'd taken command 2 weeks ago. 36 soldiers, most of them under 25 years old, and all of them watching to see if their female platoon leader could actually lead, or if she was just another academy graduate playing soldier until she got promoted and moved on. The platoon's problem was Staff Sergeant Rhett Maddox. He stood 6 feet tall, 215 pounds of muscle and bitterness. 32 years old, 12 years in the Army, former Texas high school football star who'd blown out his knee junior year when scholarship offers were coming in from Division I schools. The Army had been Plan B. 12 years later, he was still trying to prove he was better than his circumstances. He'd expected a male platoon leader, someone he could relate to, someone who understood what it meant to earn everything the hard way. Instead, he got Cassidy Brennan, West Point graduate, famous last name, Ranger tab that maybe she earned, maybe she didn't. Either way, she was an officer and he was enlisted, and that gap felt wider every day. The morning formation incident was just the beginning. Tuesday, 05:30, platoon physical training. Cassidy led them through a 6-mile run at a 7:30 pace, followed by upper body work, pull-ups, push-ups, dips. She kept pace with the fastest soldiers, finished every exercise without slowing or modifying. Her knee throbbed from an old airborne injury where she'd landed wrong during a training jump, but she didn't favor it, didn't show it, just kept moving. Maddox made sure to comment afterward where she could hear. Not bad for an LT. Probably had someone carry her ruck at West Point, though. Specialist Emma Dalton, one of Cassidy's vehicle drivers, glanced at the platoon leader to gauge reaction. Cassidy was already moving toward the barracks, heading for shower and breakfast, like she hadn't heard anything. Wednesday, range day. Cassidy shot expert with her M4 rifle 38 out of 40 targets. Then she qualified expert on the M249 squad automatic weapon and the M240 machine gun. Perfect fundamentals, perfect breath control, perfect trigger squeeze. Maddox shot expert too, then loudly suggested to his squad that the lane NCO must have been going easy on the LT. Seen it before. Safety officer calls targets closer than they are makes it easier. Thursday, vehicle maintenance. The kind of day soldiers hated because it meant hands covered in greasebacks, aching from reaching into engine compartments, hours of checking fluid levels, and torque specifications on systems that never seemed to work right. Cassidy knew every system on the Humvee, engine, transmission, electrical weapons mounts. She could diagnose problems faster than most mechanics because she'd spent her first year as a lieutenant actually reading the technical manuals instead of just signing off that she had. When 3rd Squad's Humvee wouldn't start, she traced the problem to a loose ground wire in under 5 minutes. The mechanics had been looking at the starter motor. Maddox told his soldiers she'd probably memorize the manual overnight to impress people. Academy tricks. Looks good for a day, then she'll be asking us how to do everything. First Sergeant Kowalski pulled Maddox aside Thursday afternoon in the company parking lot and explained very clearly that continued disrespect toward an officer would result in Article 15 punishment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Loss of rank, loss of pay, permanent mark on his record. Maddox agreed, said yes, First Sergeant, said he understood, then went right back to undermining her quieter, now more careful, technically legal, but corrosive as acid on metal. By Friday, 2nd Platoon had split down the middle. Half the soldiers respected Cassidy's competence and didn't care about her gender. Half watched Maddox to see if disrespecting a female officer had real consequences, or if it was just another thing the Army said mattered, but actually didn't. Friday evening, Captain Wade Ashford called Cassidy to his office. He was 36 years old, 12 years in the Army, former enlisted soldier who'd earned a commission through Officer Candidate School. Ranger Tab 2 deployment, 0 tolerance for politics or incompetence. The kind of company commander who cared about results and didn't care whose feelings got hurt achieving them. I'm hearing things about Maddox, he said. His office was standard issue gray desk, gray filing cabinets, awards and certificates on the wall behind him. Morale issues, cohesion problems. It's being handled, sir. Is it because it looks like your squad leader is running a shadow command structure where half your platoon answers to him first and you second? That's a leadership failure, Lieutenant. Cassidy kept her face neutral. He's testing boundaries, sir. I'm managing it. You've got 4 days until we roll to JRTC, the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk, Louisiana. 2 weeks of force-on-force training against a dedicated opposing force, every mistake recorded, every decision graded. If Maddox doesn't fall in line by then, your platoon won't function under evaluation pressure. That gets people hurt. Notionally hurt, but still hurt. And your career gets hurt for real. Understood, sir. So handle it, however you need to. He leaned forward. I'm giving you explicit authority to do whatever it takes to fix this. Transfer him if necessary. Relieve him from squad leader duties. I don't care. But when we step off those vehicles at Fort Polk, I need 2nd Platoon functioning as a team. Clear. Clear, sir. Cassidy walked out knowing what that meant. JRTC wasn't just training. It was a 2-week evaluation where every mistake got recorded by observer controllers, every tactical decision got analyzed, every leader got rated. If her platoon failed because of internal dysfunction, her officer evaluation report would document it. And officer evaluation reports determine promotions, assignments, career progression. One bad OER could end everything she'd worked for. That night alone in her quarters, she made a decision. She'd tried patience. She'd tried leading by example. She'd tried treating Maddox with professional respect despite his disrespect. Now she would do what her father would have done. Prove herself through performance that left zero room for doubt. The barracks room was sparse. Bed, desk, wall locker. Nothing personal except one framed photograph on the nightstand. Her father in dress uniform, captain's bars on his shoulders, taken 2 months before his final deployment to Iraq. He was smiling. She had his eyes. Cassidy sat on the floor, lights off, door locked. Her body ached from a week of trying to outwork skepticism. Her right knee throbbed. Her shoulders burned from carrying a gear she didn't need to carry, but carried anyway because leaders shared the load, and she needed to prove she could handle anything they could. Physical pain was nothing. The mental weight was crushing. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photograph she kept buried deep in her gallery. Her father's Medal of Honor citation. She'd memorized it years ago, but still read it sometimes when doubt crept in, like fog through a valley. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty. Colonel Garrett Brennan distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving as Battalion Commander 1st Battalion, 327th Infantry Regiment, during combat operations in Fallujah, Iraq, on November 15, 2005. She knew the rest by heart, how he'd led from the front, how he'd dismounted under fire, how he'd run toward the explosion instead of away from it because soldiers were dying and leaders don't watch from safety. He'd led when it mattered most and paid for it with his life. She'd spent 20 years trying not to be him, trying to build her own identity, make her own name, prove her own worth separate from his shadow. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe instead of running from his legacy, she needed to step into it. Not to be him, but to honor what he'd built by building something of her own on that foundation. Her phone buzzed. Text message from First Sergeant Kowalski. Maddox's squad is losing faith in the chain of command. Need to address before JRTC or this falls apart. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I will." She set the phone down and closed her eyes. The memory came back without permission, the way it always did when she was tired and alone. Afghanistan, 2022. Rounds snapping overhead, the crack of bullets passing close enough to feel the air pressure change. Her radio operator dead beside her, blood pooling in the dirt. 11 soldiers looking at her expecting orders, expecting her to know what to do, even though she was 23 years old and terrified. She'd been terrified. But she'd given the orders anyway because that's what leaders did. Her father had led when it mattered most. Now she would too. Saturday morning 08:15. Cassidy's phone rang. Captain Ashford's voice clipped and professional. "Listen up. Battalion's running a pre-JRTC shakedown exercise starting Monday at 0600. Every platoon in the company. 12-kilometer land navigation course with tactical problems at checkpoints culminating in a platoon live fire exercise. Your platoon goes first." "That's 48 hours notice, sir." "Correct. Which means you've got today and tomorrow to prep your soldiers back to check equipment and make sure everyone's ready. This isn't optional, Lieutenant. Performance grades go into your officer evaluation report." "Understood, sir." "And Lieutenant, this is your chance to unfuck whatever's happening with Maddox. Don't waste it." He hung up. Cassidy immediately called her squad leaders, including Maddox, and gave them until 1300 hours to have all soldiers and equipment staged for inspection and briefing. She spent the next 4 hours personally checking every radio, every weapon, every piece of gear. Found 2 PRC-153 radios with dead batteries and weak antenna connections. Got them swapped out. Noticed that Maddox's squad hadn't done their own communications check. She made sure to carry spare batteries without mentioning it. At 1300 hours, 2nd Platoon formed up in the company area. 36 soldiers, all of them carrying the kind of focused tension that came before something important. Cassidy briefed the mission. 12-kilometer course through Fort Campbell's training areas. 4 checkpoints with tactical scenarios, casualty evacuation equipment, recovery, hasty ambush, defensive position. Final event was a platoon live fire assault on a shoot house. Time standard complete everything in under 5 hours. She looked directly at Maddox. "Staff Sergeant, you've got point navigation. I'll be moving with the main body evaluating performance at each checkpoint. You put us where we need to be when we need to be there." Maddox nodded, no smile, no sarcasm, just professional acknowledgement. "Yes, ma'am." Questions? Silence. Then we step off Monday at 0600. Use today and tomorrow to prep your squads. Check your gear twice. Rehearse your battle drills. This is our chance to prove 2nd Platoon is the best in Alpha Company. Don't waste it. After she dismissed them, Maddox stood in the parking lot with his squad watching Cassidy walk toward the arms room to do one more weapons inspection. Private First Class Tyler Hastings, 20 years old from rural Georgia, spoke quietly. "Sergeant, you think she can hang on a 12-click movement? That's a lot of weight for her." "She'll hang," Maddox interrupted. "Whatever else you want to say about the LT, she's in shape and she doesn't quit. Seen that much already. But can she lead under pressure when things go sideways?" Maddox watched Cassidy disappear into the arms room. Monday we find out. Sunday. Cassidy spent the morning reviewing map sheets, plotting checkpoints, calculating distances and azimuths. The course would take them through a mix of terrain, open fields, dense woods, steep hills. Challenging but doable if the pace was right and navigation was tight. At 1600 hours, First Sergeant Kowalski found her in the company conference room, surrounded by maps and timeline calculations. "Got a minute, Lieutenant?" "Of course, First Sergeant." He closed the door, sat down across from her. 58 years old, looking every day of it, and then some. Scars on his hands, gray in his hair, eyes that had seen too much and couldn't forget any of it. "I need to tell you something. Should have told you 2 weeks ago when you took command, but I didn't know how." He took a breath. "I was your father's first sergeant in Fallujah. I was in the vehicle behind his when the first IED hit. I was there when he dismounted to help the wounded. I was 10 meters away when the second device detonated." Cassidy set down her pen. "First Sergeant, I tried to pull him out, tried to get to him. Couldn't. Vehicle was burning too hot, ammunition cooking off. By the time we got the fire suppressed enough to reach him, he was gone." Kowalski's voice stayed level, but his hands weren't steady. "I've been carrying that for 20 years. Couldn't figure out how to tell you. Couldn't figure out if you'd want to know." She didn't trust herself to speak. "Your father was the best officer I ever served with, best leader I ever saw. He cared about soldiers more than he cared about his career, which is why he never made general. And the night before he died, we were pulling maintenance on vehicles, and he told me something." Kowalski looked directly at her. He said, "Dutch, if anything happens to me, promise you'll watch over Cassidy. Make sure she knows she doesn't have to be me. She just has to be herself." Cassidy felt something crack in her chest. "I failed that promise for 20 years because I didn't know how to approach you. Didn't know what to say. But I'm watching now. And I need to know, are you here to honor him or are you here to be him? Because those are different things." Her voice came out rough. "Both. Is that wrong?" "No, it's honest." Kowalski leaned forward. "But here's what I learned in 35 years. Your father was a great leader, best I ever saw. But he made mistakes too. He was hard, demanding. Sometimes forgot that showing strength means being willing to show weakness. You don't have to repeat his mistakes. You can be better than he was." How can I be better than a Medal of Honor recipient?" "By being someone who doesn't need a medal to prove their worth. By leading soldiers who respect you because you're competent and you care, not because your name is on a memorial plaque. That's the difference between legacy and leadership, Lieutenant. One's about the past, the other's about right now." He stood up, paused at the door. "Monday's going to be hard. Maddox is going to push the pace and test you. Let him. Then show him what you're made of when it matters. Your father would have done the same thing." After Kowalski left, Cassidy sat alone with her maps and her thoughts. She walked to the battalion headquarters building as the sun was setting, found the memorial wall in the main hallway where they kept bronze plaques for every soldier from the battalion who'd been killed in action. Her father's plaque was there. Colonel Garrett Brennan, date of death November 15, 2005. Below his name were 14 other names, the soldiers who lived because he died. She traced his name with her finger. The metal was cold and smooth. Behind her, Kowalski's voice. 3 of those 14 are still serving. One's a sergeant major now. One teaches at Ranger School. One's a battalion commander in Germany. That's legacy, Lieutenant. Not the medal, the lives. The ripple effect of one decision in one moment. Does it ever get easier? Carrying a name like this? No, but it gets different. Right now, you're carrying it like a burden. Someday you'll carry it like foundation. Something to build on instead of something that weighs you down. Monday morning, 05:30 hours, still dark. Second platoon formed up in full combat equipment, rucksacks, weapons, helmets, body armor, each soldier carrying approximately 80 pounds of gear. Cassidy stood in front of them, her own ruck settled on her shoulders, her M4 rifle across her chest. "Listen up. We've got 12 kilometers and 4 tactical problems between here and the live fire range. Standard time is 5 hours. We're going to do it in 4. Not because I'm trying to impress anyone, because second platoon doesn't accept standard. We exceed it." She looked at each of them. "Some of you doubt me because I'm a woman. Some doubt me because of my name. Some of you just doubt because you don't know me yet. Fair enough. Today you'll learn who I am and what I expect. You'll learn whether I can lead under pressure. And you'll decide for yourselves whether you want to follow me or request transfer to another platoon. She turned to Maddox. Staff Sergeant, take us to checkpoint 1. Maddox checked his comms, verified his azimuth, looked at his map one more time. Second platoon, prepare to move. Standard tactical column 5-meter intervals. Let's go. They stepped off into the darkness at 0600 hours exactly. The pace was brutal from the start. Not quite running, not quite walking. Something in between that ate up ground and burned through energy. Maddox set the pace from the front, navigating by compass and pace count, barely looking at his map because he'd memorized the route. Cassidy moved in the middle of the formation, rotating through squads, checking soldiers, making small corrections. At mile 2, she noticed 2 soldiers struggling with the pace, young privates new to the platoon, still building their endurance. She had stronger soldiers redistribute ammunition from their rucks to lighten the load. Basic leadership. Take care of your people. At mile 3, Maddox's radio died, one of the defective ones that hadn't been caught during the equipment check. He reached for his spare and found dead batteries. Before he could say anything, Cassidy tossed him her spare radio. Checked all of them yesterday, figured we'd need backups. Maddox caught it one-handed, locked eyes with her for a moment, nodded once. Not quite respect yet, but acknowledgement. She'd anticipated and prepared for problems he'd missed. They reached checkpoint 1 at 0730 hours. 4 kilometers in 90 minutes with full combat load. Solid pace. The observer controller was a major from battalion staff, clipboard in hand, stopwatch around his neck. Scenario: IED strike on your lead vehicle. 4 casualties. 1 urgent surgical, 1 priority, 2 routine. Execute tactical combat casualty care. Time starts now. Maddox immediately started organizing his squad. He positioned security, designated a casualty collection point, began triaging the simulated wounded soldiers. He made mistakes. Security positions were exposed to potential follow-on attack. Casualty collection point was in a natural depression that could become a kill zone. Triage order was wrong. He went to the routine casualties first instead of the urgent surgical. Cassidy watched for 90 seconds. Let him work. Let him realize his errors. Then she stepped in. Hold. Squad leaders on me. She calmly broke down proper tactical combat casualty care positioning, drawing in the dirt with her finger. Security positions, here, here, and here, interlocking fields of fire covering likely enemy approach routes. Casualty collection point behind that berm for protection. Triage sequences: march, massive hemorrhage, airway respiration, circulation, head injury. Urgent surgical, first always. Priority second. Routine last. Questions? No questions. Execute. They completed the scenario in 7 minutes. The OC made notes on his clipboard. Much better. Continue mission. After they moved out, Cassidy pulled Maddox aside for 30 seconds. You had 70% right under pressure, Sergeant. That's better than most. Here's what we fix: security first always. Then casualties. Can't treat wounded if you're dead. Clear. Clear, ma'am. They moved out again. The terrain got harder: steep hills, mud from recent rain, thick brush that grabbed at uniforms and equipment. At mile 7, 2 soldiers started cramping. Legs seizing up, unable to continue at pace. Cassidy had Specialist Dalton, their best runner, pace them while she redistributed part of their load to herself and 2 other soldiers. Added 20 pounds to her own ruck. Her knee screamed at her. She ignored it. Maddox watched this happen. Watch the LT take extra weight without being asked, without making it a big deal, just shouldering the burden, because that's what leaders did. Something shifted in how he looked at her. Checkpoint 2 at 10:15 hours. 8 kilometers complete. The scenario: equipment recovery. Move a 180-pound ammunition can 300 meters through dense brush without using vehicles. Maddox tried to organize it, got soldiers confused about team composition, ended up with 3 soldiers trying to carry it, then 4, no consistent plan. Cassidy, Staff Sergeant, recommend 2-person teams rotating every 50 meters. Squad leaders control pace and rotation. More efficient. Maddox looked at her, looked at the ammo can, saw that she was right. Roger, execute that plan. They completed it in 7 minutes. The OC rated it satisfactory. Mile 10, 1 hour until checkpoint 3. The platoon was tired but functional. Maddox's navigation stayed tight. Cassidy's leadership stayed calm and professional. During a brief rest halt, Maddox approached her. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead, Sergeant." "Your Bronze Star. What was it for?" Cassidy hesitated. She didn't talk about Afghanistan. Didn't talk about the ambush, the dead RTO, the 11 soldiers she'd pulled out of a kill zone through combinations of luck and violence. But Maddox deserved an answer. "Afghanistan 22, Paktia province. My platoon got hit by complex ambush. 3 sides heavy fire. Radio operator was killed next to me. Had to run casualty evacuation under fire with the 11 soldiers wounded or pinned down. Got everyone out. They put me in for Silver Star. Got downgraded to Bronze." Maddox's jaw tightened. "They downgraded it, Boydam." Reviewing officer said actions didn't meet gallantry threshold. She shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Everyone lived. That's what matters. They put you in for Silver Star because you did something exceptional under fire. Then some desk officer who wasn't there downgraded it." Maddox shook his head. "That's the kind of politics I hate. You earned that Silver Star, ma'am." "Thank you, Sergeant." They reached checkpoint 3 at 11:45 hours, 10 kilometers complete, 30 minutes ahead of schedule. The scenario: hasty ambush. Position the platoon in an L-shaped ambush formation, demonstrate trigger control, and immediate action drill. Cassidy ran this one herself. Position soldiers perfectly along a ridgeline, overlooking a trail. Security elements support by fire positions of assault element ready to move on command. She triggered the ambush with precise timing, had soldiers execute the immediate action drill flawlessly. The OC walked through the position afterward. That's Ranger School quality positioning, Lieutenant. Superior execution. Continue mission. Maddox stood there watching her work and realized something. This wasn't performance. This wasn't showing off. This was competence at a level he rarely saw even from experienced platoon leaders. She'd earned that Ranger tab. She'd earned that Bronze Star. And she was better at this job than he'd wanted to admit. The final 2 kilometers took them through open terrain to the live fire range. They arrived at 12:45 hours, 4 hours and 45 minutes total time, 15 minutes ahead of schedule. The shoot house was a plywood structure designed to simulate a building with multiple rooms. 20 targets inside, half threat, half non-threat. Soldiers had to clear it room by room, making split-second decisions about what to shoot and what to protect. Squad 1 went first. Time 2 minutes, 20 seconds. 1 miss. Squad 2. 2 minutes flat. Clean run. Squad 3, Maddox's squad, went next. He led from the front, moving through the structure with controlled aggression, calling targets clearly, and keeping his team moving smoothly. Time 1 minute 55. Clean run. Squad 4, Cassidy's squad, went last. She stacked them outside the entry point, checked weapons, made eye contact with each soldier. "Smooth as fast, clear your sectors, trust your training, let's go." She led from the front, moved like water through the structure fluid, precise zero-wasted motion. She cleared the fatal funnel, stacked her team-called targets with absolute clarity. Her soldiers moved in perfect rhythm with her, feeding off her calm confidence. Room 1-2 threat targets engaged, neutralized. Room 2, 1 threat, 1 non-threat. She shot the threat, protected the non-threat. Room 3, 3 threats in close proximity. 3 controlled pairs, 3 down. Room 4, ambiguous target person holding object that could be weapon or phone. She held fire, identified it as phone, moved on. They cleared the entire structure in 1 minute, 42 seconds. 0 misses. Perfect target discrimination. The entire platoon stood watching. Even the observer controller looked impressed. Time 13:12 hours. Total mission time 4 hours 12 minutes. 48 minutes ahead of schedule. All tactical problems completed, all rated satisfactory or superior. Cassidy called platoon formation. All 36 soldiers gathered in a semicircle, tired, sweating, covered in dirt and vegetation. "Listen up. Some of you think I'm here because of my father's name. You're partially right. I am Colonel Garrett Brennan's daughter. That opened doors. But I walked through them the same way you did, by meeting the standard." She paused. Let that sink in. "I went to Ranger School. 62 days. got recycled once in mountains, came back and finished. I deployed to Afghanistan, led soldiers under fire, earned my combat patch, and my Bronze Star the same way every infantry soldier in this formation did, by not quitting when it got hard. She looked directly at Maddox. I don't expect you to respect my name. I expect you to respect my competence. If you can't do that, request transfer. But if you stay in 2nd Platoon and you follow orders and you perform, because at JRTC we're being evaluated as a team, and I don't lose. She held Maddox's eyes. Staff Sergeant Maddox, you've been testing me for 2 weeks. I understand why. You wanted to know if I was real. Now you know. So here's your choice, get on board or request transfer to another platoon. Decide now. 10 seconds of absolute silence. Every soldier watching to see what would happen. Then Maddox stepped forward and rendered a proper hand salute. Sharp, professional, respectful. I'm on board, ma'am, and I apologize for being unprofessional. Won't happen again. Cassidy returned the salute. Good. Then let's get ready to dominate at JRTC. The observer controller walked over as the platoon was breaking down equipment. Lieutenant Brennan, that was exceptional performance across all metrics. Your platoon is tracking first in the company. I'll be putting that in my report to battalion commander. Thank you, sir. After he left, Kowalski approached. Your father would be proud. That was leadership. Thank you, First Sergeant. But we're just getting started. JRTC is 2 weeks of being evaluated constantly, every decision recorded, every mistake analyzed. Today proved you can lead. Now you have to prove you can lead when everything's going wrong and everyone's watching. I'm ready. I know you are. That's what scares me. That evening, Cassidy sat alone in her quarters, every muscle aching, knee swollen, shoulders burning. But for the first time since taking command, she felt like maybe she'd earned something more valuable than a good evaluation report. She'd earned the respect of soldiers who'd started as skeptics and ended as believers. 36 infantry soldiers who'd watched her lead under pressure and decided she was worth following. Her phone buzzed. Text from her mother. Heard from First Sergeant Kowalski. He said you did well today. Your father would be so proud. I am too. Love you. Cassidy stared at the message for a long time, then replied, Love you too, Mom, thanks. She looked at her father's photo on the nightstand. Dress uniform, captain's bars, smile that never quite reached his eyes because he'd seen too much combat by the time that photo was taken. 20 years she'd been running from his shadow or trying to fill it. Maybe now she was finally learning to just stand in it, to build something of her own on the foundation he'd laid. Her father had led when it mattered most and paid for it with his life. Now it was her turn to lead. Not to be him, just to honor what he'd built by building something worth honoring in return. Monday night became Tuesday morning, became the reality that in 72 hours, 2nd Platoon would load vehicles and roll south to Fort Polk, Louisiana for 2 weeks at the Joint Readiness Training Center. 2 weeks where every decision would be graded, every tactical choice analyzed, every moment of leadership evaluated by observer controllers who'd seen every mistake imaginable and could spot weakness from 100 meters away. Cassidy was ready, her platoon was ready, and Staff Sergeant Rhett Maddox, formerly her biggest obstacle, was now positioned to be her strongest supporter. The real test was just beginning. The convoy rolled out of Fort Campbell at 0430 Thursday morning, 37 Humvees carrying Alpha Company south toward Louisiana, and 2 weeks of controlled suffering. Cassidy sat in the passenger seat of her lead vehicle, watching the Kentucky darkness slide past, feeling the weight of what came next settle into her bones. Fort Polk, the Joint Readiness Training Center, 280 square miles of Louisiana swamp and pine forest, where the Army sent units to get broken down and rebuilt, where observer controllers with clipboards and recording devices followed every platoon, documenting every mistake, grading every decision, where careers lived or died based on performance under pressure. Specialist Emma Dalton drove hands steady on the wheel, eyes scanning the road ahead. 22 years old, Kentucky accent, quiet competence. She'd been with 2nd Platoon for 8 months, longer than Cassidy, long enough to remember the previous platoon leader who'd lasted 6 months before requesting transfer. You nervous, ma'am? Dalton asked. About JRTC always. It's designed to make you nervous. Heard from 3rd Platoon that last rotation their LT froze during a contact drill. Just stopped giving orders. First Sergeant had to take over. Cassidy looked at her. I won't freeze. Didn't think you would, ma'am. Just saying it happens to people. Behind them, 35 more soldiers and 9 more vehicles, all of them tired from the 0300 wake-up, all of them wondering what the next 2 weeks would bring. Staff Sergeant Maddox rode in the second vehicle, already reviewing his patrol leader checklist, already thinking 3 steps ahead. The relationship between Cassidy and Maddox had shifted after Monday's shakedown exercise. Not friendship, not even warmth, but professional respect, mutual recognition that they were both competent at their jobs and could work together if ego didn't get in the way. Maddox still had doubts, still believed female infantry officers were a political experiment that would eventually fail. But he'd watched Cassidy lead under pressure and couldn't deny what he'd seen. She knew her job. She made good decisions. She kept her head when things got chaotic. That was enough for now. They reached Fort Polk at 16:30 hours after 12 hours of driving through Mississippi heat and Louisiana humidity. The base looked exactly like every other Army installation Cassidy had ever seen: squat concrete buildings, motor pools full of vehicles, training areas that stretched to the horizon. But JRTC had a particular feel to it, a weight in the air. Every unit that came through here knew they were being evaluated by the best observer controllers in the Army, knew that mistakes made here would follow them for years in the form of after-action reviews and lessons learned briefings. Alpha Company staged at their tactical assembly area, a clearing in the pine forest where they'd spend the next 2 weeks operating out of. Tents went up, vehicles got staged, weapons got cleaned. The company commander, Captain Ashford, gathered all the platoon leaders for initial briefing. Listen up. We start mission rotations tomorrow at 0600. Each platoon gets evaluated on mounted patrols, dismounted patrols, cordon and search operations, and one major culminating event. Your performance determines company rating, which determines my evaluation report, which determines whether I get promoted or stagnate. So don't fuck this up. He looked at Cassidy. Lieutenant Brennan's 2nd Platoon's first mission is tomorrow. Mounted patrol with simulated IED threat. You'll have observer controllers embedded with you documenting everything. Every radio call, every tactical decision, every moment of leadership. Questions? No, sir. Good. Get your platoon prepped and rested. Tomorrow we find out if that shakedown exercise was luck or skill. That evening, Cassidy gathered her squad leaders in her tent. Maddox plus 3 other sergeants. Sergeant First Class Rivera from 1st Squad, Staff Sergeant Blake from 3rd Squad, and Sergeant Walsh from 4th Squad. She spread the map on the ground between them. Tomorrow's route takes us 12 kilometers through mixed terrain. Intelligence reports possible IED threat along the main supply route. Our mission is to patrol the route, identify threats, and establish security at Checkpoint Falcon. Maddox studied the map. That's IED alley, ma'am. Every unit that's come through here in the last month has gotten hit on that stretch, which means UPFR knows we're expecting it. So the question is whether they'll hit us where we expect or try something different. Rivera, 38 years old, 2 deployments, quiet professional, pointed to a secondary road. If I was OPFR, I'd channel us onto this alternate route with a fake IED on the main route, then hit us here where we think we're safe. Cassidy nodded. Agreed, so we prep for both. Main route and alternates. Every vehicle commander needs to know the entire route, not just their position and formation. If we lose communications, everyone can navigate independently. They spent 2 hours going through contingencies, IED strike response, vehicle breakdown procedures, casualty evacuation, react to contact drills. Everything they might face rehearsed until every squad leader could execute without orders. Maddox watched Cassidy work through the planning process and recognized something he'd seen in good platoon leaders before. She didn't just plan for success. She planned for failure and had backup plans for the backup plans. At 2200 hours, Cassidy dismissed everyone except Maddox. Sergeant, I need your honest assessment. Is the platoon ready for this? Maddox considered the question. Honestly, ma'am, yes. The soldiers trust you now. They've seen you perform. But JRTC has a way of finding weaknesses you didn't know you had. So we're ready until we're not, and then we adapt. Fair assessment. Can I ask you something, ma'am? Go ahead. Why infantry? With your name, your record, you could have gone any branch. Could have been military intelligence or logistics, Or something that didn't involve carrying 80 pounds through the woods while people shoot at you. Why choose the hardest path? Cassidy was quiet for a moment. Because my father was infantry. Because when I was 9 years old and they told me he died leading soldiers in combat, I decided that if I was going to serve, I was going to serve the way he did. No shortcuts, no safe positions. Front line leading from the front. That's a lot of weight to carry, ma'am. It's the weight I chose. Now get some sleep, Sergeant. Tomorrow's going to be long. The mission launched at 0600 Friday morning. 10 vehicles, 36 soldiers, 4 embedded observer controllers documenting everything. Cassidy rode in the lead vehicle with Dalton driving, watching the route unfold through humid Louisiana morning. The observer controller assigned to her vehicle was a major named Williams, 45 years old, Ranger Tab 3 deployments. He sat in the back seat with a tablet computer recording her every radio call and tactical decision. "Remember, Lieutenant," Williams said, "I'm here to observe and evaluate, not to interfere. You're in command. Make your decisions and live with the consequences." "Understood, sir." The convoy moved at 25 miles per hour, scanning for threats, maintaining proper intervals between vehicles. Every soldier tense, knowing that OPFR could trigger an ambush or IED strike at any moment. At kilometer 4, Dalton spotted something. "Man vehicle ahead blocking the road." Cassidy keyed her radio. "All Alpha 2 elements halt. Maintain security." She dismounted with her rifle and moved forward on foot with Maddox to investigate. The vehicle was an old civilian pickup truck, engine hood up, abandoned in the middle of the road. Classic IED indicator. Vehicle has bait explosives hidden nearby, waiting for someone to investigate. Maddox looked at her. "Call EOD. Negative." "That's what they expect. This is a scenario designed to slow us down and make us predictable." She studied the terrain. "The real threat isn't the vehicle. It's the channeling effect. They want us to take the alternate route." She pulled out her map, traced the alternate route with her finger, saw what Rivera had seen the night before. The alternate route passed through a natural choke point, perfect ambush site. "We're not taking the bait," she said. "We're going to mark this vehicle, establish security, and continue on the main route. If there's an IED, we'll deal with it. But I'm not getting channeled into a kill zone." Major Williams made a note on his tablet, said nothing. They marked the vehicle with chem lights, established a security perimeter, and continued on the main route. At kilometer 7, the IED detonated. The explosion was simulated pyrotechnics in smoke instead of actual explosives, but the effect was the same. Third vehicle in the convoy immobilized 3 simulated casualties. Cassidy's training took over. Contact IED. All vehicles halt. It established security. She dismounted, ran to the damaged vehicle while Maddox organized a security perimeter. The observer controllers triggered their casualty cards on 3 soldiers marked as wounded. 1. Urgent 2 routine. This was the test. How fast could she organize casualty evacuation while maintaining security while continuing the mission? All simultaneously. She didn't hesitate. First squad security, north and east. Third squad, south and west. Fourth squad casualty collection point. Behind that berm, SSG, Maddox, you have tactical command. I'm running case vac. Maddox took over the security positions while Cassidy organized the medical response. She'd learned from the mistakes made during the shakedown exercise. Security first, proper coverage of likely enemy approach routes. Casualty collection point in a protected location. Triage by urgency, the urgent surgical patient got treated first. She called the 9-line medevac request over radio, clear and professional, every element perfect. Grid coordinates number of patients, special equipment, required security at landing zone. The observer controllers timed everything. 12 minutes from IED detonation to simulated helicopter evacuation. Textbook response. Major Williams made more notes. Still said nothing. They continued the mission. Reached checkpoint Falcon at 11:45 hours. Established security. Completed the mission objectives. During the after-action review, Major Williams addressed the entire platoon. "That was solid performance under pressure. Lieutenant Brennan, your decision not to take the alternate route avoided an ambush that would have been much worse than the IED. Your case vac procedures were by the book. Time from explosion to evacuation was within acceptable standards. Good work." Cassidy nodded. "Thank you, sir." But Williams continued, "You made one critical error. When you dismounted to investigate that vehicle blocking the road, you didn't establish far security before approaching. If Op 4 had been using that as bait for a sniper, you'd be a casualty right now. Remember security first always. Don't let mission focus make you skip fundamentals. The critique stung because it was correct. She'd been focused on not getting channeled and had forgotten basic movement to contact procedures. Understood, sir. Won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Overall rating satisfactory with notes. Continue to next mission. Saturday brought dismounted patrol operations. Second platoon moved on foot through dense Louisiana forest, full combat equipment, searching for simulated enemy positions. The heat was brutal. 95 degrees, 90% humidity air thick enough to chew. Soldiers drank water constantly, sweat soaking through uniforms, legs burning from the weight of rucks and body armor. Cassidy moved with first squad, rotating through positions, checking soldiers, making sure everyone maintained hydration and proper intervals. Her knee throbbed from the old airborne injury, but she didn't favor. It didn't show weakness. At kilometer 3-point man signaled halt. Possible enemy position ahead. Cassidy moved forward to assess. Through the trees, she could see a small structure, likely an OPFOR observation post. The question was whether to bypass it and continue mission or clear it and risk contact. She made the call. We clear it. Can't leave potential enemy behind our lines. She positioned squads in support by fire positions, organized an assault element, planned the approach. This was basic infantry tactics, but execution mattered. Speed, surprise, violence of action. The assault went clean. Her soldiers moved through the objective like water clearing the structure in under 3 minutes with no simulated casualties. They found 2 OPFOR role players inside, both killed by the assault element. The observer controller rated it superior. But the mission continued. Another 4 kilometers to the objective. Another 2 hours of movement through heat and terrain that seemed designed to break soldiers. At 15:30 hours, they reached the objective, a simulated village that needed to be searched for enemy weapons caches. Cordon and search operations, one of the most complex missions infantry units conducted, required coordination, discipline, and cultural awareness, not to alienate the civilian role players. Cassidy organized the cordon, assigned search teams, established a detainee collection point. She'd studied the procedures, knew the legal requirements, understood the human dimension of searching people's homes while trying to maintain their dignity. The operation took 3 hours. They found 2 weapons caches, detained 5 enemy role players, and completed the search without any incidents of excessive force or cultural insensitivity. The observer controller rated it outstanding. That evening, exhausted, covered in dirt and sweat, Cassidy sat with her squad leaders reviewing the day's performance. Maddox spoke first. That was good work today, ma'am. Soldiers performed well. Leadership was solid. Rivera agreed. The cordon and search was textbook. You kept it professional even when that one role player was giving us attitude. That matters. Tomorrow's going to be harder, Cassidy said. We've got a night raid scheduled. Complex target, multiple buildings, potential for high casualties if we screw it up. She spread the map showing their objective, a compound on the edge of the training area, multiple structures, intelligence indicating high-value target inside. This is the kind of mission that separates good platoons from great ones. We hit it at a 300 when they're least ready. We move fast, we're violent, and we're precise. No mistakes. They planned until 2200 hours. Every detail rehearsed, every contingency considered, every soldier knowing exactly what to do at exactly what time. Cassidy dismissed them and sat alone in her tent reviewing the plan one more time, looking for weaknesses she might have missed. Her phone had limited service in the training area, but a text message got through, her mother. Thinking of you, be safe. Your stepfather is doing better. Don't worry about us. Focus on your mission. Love you. Cassidy typed back, love you too. Tell him I'm glad he's recovering. She thought about the choice she'd have to make if something happened to her stepfather while she was here. If the call came that he'd taken a turn for the worse, if her mother needed her, she'd have to choose between family and duty. Between being a daughter and being a platoon leader. She hoped that choice wouldn't come, but in the back of her mind, she knew it might. The raid launched at 02:45 Sunday morning. Second platoon loaded into vehicles, drove to a release point 1 kilometer from the objective, then moved on foot through complete darkness with night vision goggles, turning the world into green shadows. Cassidy led from the front with first squad. Maddox controlled the support element. Every soldier moved in silence, weapons ready, senses heightened by darkness and adrenaline. At 03:15 hours, they reached their assault positions. The compound lay ahead, 3 buildings arranged in a U-shaped wall surrounding the complex, one main gate. Cassidy gave the signal. Breach teams moved to the gate with explosive charges. Support teams positioned to cover windows, impossible escape routes. The charge detonated loud crack of simulated explosives, and the assault element flowed through the gate like water through a broken dam. Building 1 left side. First squad cleared it in 90 seconds. 2 enemy role players engaged and neutralized. No friendly casualties. Building 2 center position. This one was harder. 2 stories, multiple rooms, more OP for defenders. Cassidy led the clearance personally, moving room to room, calling targets, keeping her soldiers moving in disciplined violence. 3rd room, 2nd floor. She pushed through the door and found herself facing an OP4 role player with a weapon already aimed at her. Split-second decision, shoot or die. She fired. Double tap center mass. The role player marked himself killed. But as she moved to clear the next room, another OP4 appeared from a side door she hadn't noticed. He triggered his blank rounds, indicating she'd been shot. The observer controller marked her as a casualty. Lieutenant, you're wounded. Leg wound. You can give orders, but you can't move. This was the real test. Could she lead while incapacitated? Could her platoon function without her physically present? She keyed her radio from her position on the floor. Alpha 26 to Alpha 27. I'm hit. SSG Maddox, you have tactical command. Continue clearance of Building 2, then move to Building 3. I'll coordinate from here. Maddox's voice came back steady. Roger, I have command. 2nd squad on me. We're finishing this building. Cassidy stayed on the floor simulating her wound and coordinated the rest of the operation by radio. She called for casualty evacuation for herself. She maintained communication with the support element. She tracked the assault element's progress through the remaining buildings. Building 2 cleared. Building 3 remained the high-value target location. Maddox led the final assault. She heard it through the radio's steady stream of reports as his teams cleared rooms, engaged enemy, secured objectives. Building 3 clear. HVT secured. Objective complete. Total time from breach to objective secured 23 minutes. 1 friendly casualty, Cassidy herself. Enemy neutralized. Mission accomplished. During the after-action review, Major Williams addressed the entire platoon. That was one of the better night raids I've evaluated this rotation. Lieutenant Brennan, your planning was meticulous. Your execution was violent and fast. And when you became a casualty, you maintained command and control from a static position. That's exactly what we look for. He paused. However, you made one tactical error. When you cleared that 3rd room, you didn't check the side door before moving forward. Always clear your corners. Always check your 6. That mistake got you shot. Cassidy, still sitting on the ground with her simulated leg wound, nodded. Understood, sir. SSG Maddox, you stepped up when your platoon leader went down. You completed the mission without hesitation. That's good NCO leadership. Maddox said, thank you, sir. Overall rating superior performance with tactical notes. This platoon is tracking #1 in the company right now. Don't lose that momentum. The days blurred together after that. Monday, mounted patrol with complex IED scenario. Tuesday, defensive operations holding key terrain against OP4 assault. Wednesday, convoy operations with vehicle breakdown and casualty evacuation. Each day, 2nd platoon performed at the top of the company. Each day, Cassidy made decisions under pressure and lived with the consequences. Each day, the gap between her and Maddox closed a little more as mutual respect replaced skepticism. By Wednesday evening, she'd lost 12 pounds from the heat and exertion. Her uniform hung looser. Her knee was swollen to twice normal size. She popped ibuprofen like candy and kept moving because stopping meant weakness, and weakness meant failure. First Sergeant Kowalski found her at 1900 hours sitting alone outside her tent, staring at a map she'd long since memorized. You're running yourself into the ground, Lieutenant. I'm fine, First Sergeant. You're limping. Your knee looks like a grapefruit. You've lost weight you didn't have to lose. You're not fine. I'm functional. That's all that matters. Kowalski sat down next to her. Your father did the same thing. ran himself ragged trying to prove he was tougher than everyone else, ended up with stress fractures and chronic pain. Being tough doesn't mean destroying yourself. What does it mean then? Knowing when to push and when to recover. Tomorrow's the big one, the final evaluation. Battalion commander's going to be there watching. Every observer controller in the rotation is going to be evaluating your platoon. You need to be at your best, which means you need to rest tonight. I'll rest when this is over. That's what your father said. Then he pushed himself until his body broke down. Don't make his mistakes, Cassidy. Be better than he was. She looked at Kowalski, 58 years old, carrying 35 years of service and 20 years of guilt over a man he couldn't save. Tell me about him, about the day he died. Kowalski was quiet for a long moment. You sure you want to know? I need to know. He took a breath. We were running a mounted patrol outside Fallujah, 4 vehicles. Your father was in the lead vehicle, I was in the second. We'd done dozens of these patrols, routine stuff. Then the IED hit the lead vehicle. Big one, blew it off the road, flipped it. We all went into action mode, security perimeter check for casualties, prepare for follow-on attack. Kowalski's voice stayed steady, but his hands weren't. Your father was already moving. Dismounted before I could even process what happened. Ran to the destroyed vehicle to check on his soldiers. I was right behind him, maybe 10 meters back. He reached the vehicle, started pulling wounded soldiers out. That's when I saw the second IED, wires leading from the vehicle to a position off the road. I tried to yell a warning. Wasn't fast enough. He stopped, started again. The secondary detonated when he was pulling the last wounded soldier out. Caught him full force. I was close enough that the blast knocked me down, burned my hands, but far enough that I survived. He didn't. By the time I got to him, he was gone. But that soldier he was pulling out, that soldier lived. All 4 wounded from that vehicle lived because your father got to them first. Cassidy felt tears on her face but didn't wipe them away. Did he say anything at the end? No, it was instant. But the night before, when we were doing vehicle maintenance, he talked about you. Said you were the smartest 9-year-old he'd ever met. Said you were going to do great things someday. Said he hoped you'd choose your own path and not feel pressured to follow his. I didn't choose my own path. I chose his. No, you chose service. The path is different. He was a battalion commander trying to make colonel. You're a platoon leader trying to prove you belong. Different challenges, different fights, but the same commitment to soldiers and mission. Kowalski stood up. Get some sleep, Lieutenant. Tomorrow's the culminating event. Everything we've done for the last week and a half leads to this. Don't waste it by running on empty. After he left, Cassidy sat alone with her thoughts and her father's ghost. She pulled out her phone, looked at the photo she kept of him in dress uniform, smiling at the camera with eyes that had seen too much. 20 years she'd been chasing his shadow. 20 years trying to be worthy of his name. Maybe it was time to accept that she'd never be him, and that was okay. She just needed to be the best version of herself. She finally went to sleep at 2200 hours, knowing that in 8 hours everything would come down to one final mission. One last chance to prove 2nd Platoon was the best in Alpha Company. One final evaluation that would determine whether all this suffering had been worth it. The mission brief came Thursday morning at 0800 hours. Battalion commander present, all company commanders, all observer controllers. This was the culminating event, the final test that would determine company rankings and individual ratings. Captain Ashford stood in front of a terrain model showing the objective. 2nd Platoon, you are executing a raid on a defended compound. Intelligence indicates high-value target inside multiple enemy fighters, possible hostage situation. You'll infill on foot assault. The objective, secure the HVT and exfil under contact. This is the most complex mission profile we run at JRTC. He looked directly at Cassidy. Questions, Lieutenant. Time hack for mission start, sir. 1400 hours. There are 5 hours to plan, rehearse, and prepare. Every observer controller in this rotation will be evaluating your platoon. Battalion commander will be watching personally. This determines final rankings. Don't fuck it up. Cassidy gathered her squad leaders immediately. They had 5 hours to plan a mission that would take 3 hours to execute. 5 hours to think through every contingency, every possible failure point, every tactical decision that could make the difference between success and disaster. She spread the terrain map on the ground. 4 buildings arranged in a square pattern, walls on 3 sides open on the 4th. Intelligence suggests HVT in the northeast building. Guard force estimated at 15 to 20 OPFOR. Possible hostage, meaning we can't just blow through with maximum violence. Maddox studied the objective. This is a surgical mission, ma'am. We need precision, not just speed. Agreed. We hit it at 1400 when the sun is brightest, limit their ability to use shadows for defense. Support by fire here and here to cover our approach. Assault element splits. First squad takes northeast building, where the HVT likely is. Third squad clears northwest building. Fourth squad security and reserve. Rivera asked, what about that hostage? If they're using a civilian as a shield, then we don't shoot. We identify, isolate, and extract. Mission success means HVT captured and 0 civilian casualties. I'll lead the HVT building clearance personally. They spent 3 hours planning, then 2 hours rehearsing. Every soldier knew their role. Every team knew their objective. Every squad leader had memorized the plan and all the contingency plans. At 13:30 hours, 2nd Platoon loaded into vehicles and drove to the release point. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, watched them roll out. His presence added weight to an already heavy mission. They dismounted 1 kilometer from the objective and moved on foot through Louisiana heat. Cassidy's knees screamed at her, but she pushed through it. Her soldiers were watching. Weakness wasn't an option. At 13:55 hours, they reached assault positions. Every element ready, every soldier locked in. Cassidy gave the signal. Support by fire opened up, blank rounds cracking through the air, suppressing enemy positions. The assault element moved. First squad with Cassidy hit the northeast building. Breach flow clear. First room 2, OPFOR engaged. Second room 1, OPFOR bar 1 civilian role player on the floor. Cassidy held fire, protected the civilian, neutralized the enemy. Third room, the HVT, standing with hands up, surrendering. Too easy. Something was wrong. That's when she saw the wires. The HVT was wearing a simulated suicide vest. If they took him into custody without proper procedures, he'd detonate and kill everyone in the room. This was the real test, not just tactical proficiency, but tactical judgment under pressure. Cassidy keyed her radio. All elements hold position. HVT is wearing possible S-vest. Need EOD procedures before we move him. She spent 5 minutes carefully securing the HVT using techniques she'd learned in training for exactly this scenario. Secured his hands, verified the vest was simulation only, marked him as captured without triggering the device. Meanwhile, 3rd squad finished clearing the northwest building. 4th squad secured the perimeter. The entire compound was under 2nd Platoon control in under 20 minutes. But then the exfil started. An OPFOR counterattacked with everything they had. 50 OPFOR role players assaulted their position from 2 sides. Heavy simulated machine gun fire. Simulated mortars impacting close enough to throw dirt. This was the chaos test. Could Cassidy maintain command and control while under heavy contact? She moved between positions, directing fire, calling for support, organizing the withdrawal. Maddox controlled one flank, Rivera the other. They leapfrogged back toward the exfil point, maintaining security while carrying the HVT and the civilian role player. 2 soldiers got marked as casualties during the withdrawal. Cassidy organized their evacuation while continuing to fight, maintained discipline while everything was trying to come apart. They reached the exfil point at 17:05 hours, 3 hours and 5 minutes from mission start to completion. 1 HVT secured, 1 civilian protected, 2 friendly casualties, but both evacuated properly. Mission complete. The observer controllers gathered for immediate after-action review. Major Williams spoke first. That was the best platoon raid I've evaluated in 3 years at JRTC. Lieutenant Brennan, your identification of the suicide vest prevented a catastrophic casualty event. Your command and control during the exfil was textbook. Your soldiers performed with discipline under heavy pressure. The battalion commander stepped forward. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, 52 years old. Ranger tabbed 4 deployments, the kind of officer who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. 2nd Platoon, I've been watching you all week. Today confirmed what I've been seeing. This is how infantry platoons are supposed to function. Lieutenant Brennan, you've done exceptional work here. Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished. Those last words hit harder than any critique. Cassidy stood at attention, tried to keep her face professional, felt emotion threatening to break through. Thank you, sir. Final rankings will be posted tomorrow, but I'll tell you now, 2nd Platoon is first in the company, second in the battalion. Outstanding performance. After the battalion commander left, after the observer controllers finished their documentation, after the adrenaline started to fade, Cassidy sat on the ground with her soldiers and felt the weight lift. 2 weeks of constant evaluation, 2 weeks of pressure and heat and pain, 2 weeks of proving herself over and over and over again. And they'd finished at the top. Maddox sat down next to her. Ma'am, that was exceptional leadership. The way you identified that suicide vest, the way you controlled the exfil under fire, that's the difference between good and great. We did it together, Sergeant. You controlled that flank perfectly. Rivera held security. Every squad leader performed. This wasn't me. This was us. Still, you're the one who made the calls. You're the one who kept it together when it got chaotic. That's leadership. He paused. I was wrong about you back at Campbell when I thought you were just riding your father's name. I was wrong. You earned every bit of respect this platoon has for you, and I'm sorry I made you prove it the hard way. Cassidy looked at him. 32 years old, bitter about missed opportunities, finally letting go of that bitterness and accepting reality for what it was. Apology accepted, Sergeant, and for what it's worth, you're a damn good NCO. You just needed to remember that competent leaders don't all look the same. Roger that, ma'am. That night, the final night at JRTC before they'd pack up and return to Fort Campbell, Cassidy sat outside her tent and called her mother. The call went through, this time clear connection despite the distance. Mom, Cassidy, how are you? How did it go? We finished first in the company, second in the battalion. Best ratings my platoon could have gotten. Her mother's voice broke with emotion. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. Your father would be so proud. How's Robert? Is he okay? He's doing much better, out of ICU, recovering well. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. He wanted me to tell you that he's sorry for the scare and that he's proud of you for staying focused on your mission. Relief washed through her. Tell him I love him. Tell him I'll be home soon. I will. Cassidy, I need to tell you something. Your father wrote you a letter before he deployed. He gave it to First Sergeant Kowalski and asked him to give it to you when you became an officer. I think Kowalski's been waiting for the right moment. You should ask him for it. A letter, after all these years. He wanted you to know something important, something he couldn't tell you when you were 9. Ask Kowalski for it. After the call ended, Cassidy found Kowalski sitting by the command post drinking coffee despite the late hour. First Sergeant, my mother said my father gave you a letter for me before he died. Kowalski set down his coffee, reached into his assault pack and pulled out a sealed envelope, worn and creased from 20 years of carrying. He gave this to me the night before that patrol, said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you when you became an officer. I've been carrying it for 5 years, waiting for the right moment. He handed it to her. This is the right moment. Cassidy took the envelope with shaking hands, her father's handwriting on the front, to Cassidy when she pins on her bars. She walked to her tent, sat on her cot, and opened the letter her father had written 20 years ago. The words blurred as tears came, but she read it anyway. Read his hopes for her future. Read his advice about leadership and service. Read his acknowledgement that he'd pushed her hard, maybe too hard, because he wanted her to be strong enough to handle whatever life threw at her. And then the final paragraph, don't try to be me. I made mistakes. I was hard when I should have been gentle. I was demanding when I should have been understanding. Be better than I was. Lead with compassion and courage. But most importantly, lead as yourself. The Army doesn't need another Garrett Brennan. It needs the first Cassidy Brennan. She read those words 3 times. Let them sink in. Let them reshape 20 years of trying to fill shoes that were never meant to be filled. Her father hadn't wanted her to be him. He'd wanted her to be herself. And finally, after 2 weeks of proving herself to every skeptic and doubter and observer with the clipboard, she understood that she'd already succeeded. Not because she'd matched his legacy, but because she'd built her own. 2nd Platoon packed up Friday morning and began the long drive back to Fort Campbell. Cassidy rode in her usual vehicle with Dalton driving, watching Louisiana disappear in the rearview mirror, feeling different than she had 2 weeks ago. Lighter somehow. Like she'd been carrying weight she didn't realize was there and had finally set it down. The formal outbrief came Friday afternoon before they loaded vehicles. Battalion commander addressed all of Alpha Company, announced final rankings, handed out certificates and commendations. 2nd Platoon Alpha Company, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison said first place in company, second in battalion. Outstanding performance across all metrics. Lieutenant Brennan stepped forward. Cassidy moved to the front, stood at attention. For exceptional leadership during JRTC rotation 24-06, I'm awarding you the Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device. Your performance under pressure, your tactical judgment, and your ability to maintain command and control during complex operations represents the highest standards of infantry leadership. He pinned the medal on her uniform, shook her hand, said quietly where only she could hear, "Your father was my company commander in Iraq. Best officer I ever served with. You're just as good as he was. Maybe better." The words settled into her chest and stayed there. The convoy rolled north through Mississippi, through Tennessee, back toward Kentucky and Fort Campbell. Cassidy dozed in her seat, exhausted, satisfied knowing that whatever came next, she'd proven something important to herself. She wasn't her father's shadow anymore. She was her own person, casting her own light, building her own legacy on the foundation he'd laid. And that was enough. The convoy rolled through Fort Campbell's main gate at 16:45 hours Friday evening, 37 Humvees, covered in Louisiana dust and Kentucky rain, carrying soldiers who'd survived 2 weeks of JRTC and come out harder than when they'd left. Cassidy sat in the passenger seat watching familiar buildings slide past, feeling the weight of exhaustion and accomplishment settle into her bones. They'd done it. First in the company, second in the battalion. Rankings that would go into officer evaluation reports and NSOers that would follow these soldiers through their careers that proved 2nd Platoon was something special. But Cassidy knew the real victory wasn't the rankings. It was Staff Sergeant Rhett Maddox sitting in the vehicle behind her, no longer her antagonist, but her partner in leadership. It was 36 infantry soldiers who'd started this rotation as skeptics and finished as believers. It was the knowledge that she'd led under pressure and hadn't broken. Captain Ashford addressed Alpha Company in the motor pool as they staged vehicles for turn-in. "Outstanding work at JRTC. You represented this company and this battalion with distinction. Take the weekend to recover. Monday morning 0900 we've got an awards formation. Dress uniform. Look sharp." He caught Cassidy's eye. "Lieutenant Brennan, my office, 0800 Monday. We need to talk about your next assignment." That night, Cassidy collapsed in her barracks quarters, too exhausted to unpack, too tired to care that her uniform was filthy and her boots were caked with dried mud. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall, phone in hand, staring at her father's letter that she'd read a dozen times since Kowalski had given it to her. "Be better than I was. Lead as yourself." Her phone buzzed. Text from her mother with a photo attached. Robert in his hospital bed, smiling, giving a thumbs up. The message: "Coming home tomorrow. Doctors say full recovery expected. He's proud of you, so am I." Cassidy typed back, "Love you both. See you soon." Another text, this one from Maddox. "Sergeant First Class results posted. Made the list. Thanks for the recommendation, ma'am." She smiled. She'd submitted the recommendation 2 weeks ago, right before they'd rolled to JRTC. Maddox had earned that promotion 10 times over, and now it was official. "Congratulations, Sergeant First Class. Well deserved." She finally stood it up, peeled off her filthy uniform, and took the first real shower she'd had in 2 weeks. Let the hot water wash away Louisiana swamp and Kentucky rain and 2 weeks of pushing herself past limits she didn't know she had. When she came out, there was a knock at her door. First Sergeant Kowalski, still in uniform despite the late hour. "Got a minute, Lieutenant?" "Of course, First Sergeant. Come in." He stepped inside, closed the door, looked around at her sparse quarters, bed, desk, wall, locker. Nothing personal except her father's photo and the folded letter on her nightstand. "You read it. 3 times at JRTC, another dozen since we got back." "What did you think?" Cassidy sat on her bed. "I think my father knew something I didn't. That I was trying to be him instead of being myself. That I was carrying his shadow like a burden instead of using it as a foundation. He was smart like that. Saw things other people missed. Kowalski sat in her desk chair. I need to tell you something about Monday's awards formation. Captain Ashford is going to announce some personnel changes. You're moving to Company XO. Maddox is taking over as second platoon's platoon sergeant, and there's going to be a new platoon leader. Already I've only had the platoon for 6 weeks, Values. You've done in 6 weeks what most lieutenants take a year to accomplish. You've proven yourself, earned your soldiers' respect, and demonstrated leadership under the worst conditions the Army can create. Time to move up. That's how good officers progress. Cassidy felt something twist in her chest. She'd just gotten second platoon functioning as a team, just earned their trust. Now she had to leave them. Kowalski read her face. I know. It's hard to leave soldiers you've led, but that's part of command. You build something, then you hand it to the next leader and trust they'll maintain what you built. Your father struggled with that too. Hated giving up command, but he did it because that's what the mission required. How do I know the next platoon leader will be good enough? You don't. You just train your NCOs well enough that they can compensate if the new LT is weak. That's why Maddox is perfect for platoon sergeant. He knows your standards. He'll maintain them. After Kowalski left, Cassidy sat alone thinking about leadership and legacy and what it meant to build something knowing you'd have to leave it behind. Her father had built a reputation as one of the best battalion commanders in the Army. Then he died before he could see what that reputation became. She was building something too. Something smaller, but no less important. A platoon that functioned like a machine, NCOs who led with competence and compassion, soldiers who understood that excellence wasn't about gender or background, but about meeting standards and taking care of each other. Now she had to trust that what she'd built would survive without her. Saturday morning she ran 6 miles through Fort Campbell at a pace that made her knees scream but cleared her head. Came back to find Specialist Emma Dalton waiting outside her barracks. Ma'am, can I talk to you? Of course, Dalton. What's up? I heard you're moving to XO. I wanted to thank you for these last 6 weeks. You proved something important to me. What's that? That female soldiers can lead infantry units and earn respect through competence. I came from a combat support unit where we were always treated like we didn't belong in the fight. You showed me that belonging isn't about permission. It's about performance. Cassidy felt emotion rise in her throat. You earned your place too, Dalton. You're one of the best drivers in the company. Don't let anyone tell you different. Will you write me a letter of recommendation? I'm applying for officer candidate school. Want to be an infantry officer like you. I'll write you the strongest recommendation I can. You'll make an outstanding officer. After Dalton left, Cassidy thought about ripple effects. Her father had saved 14 soldiers who went on to build careers and families and legacies of their own. Now she was influencing soldiers like Dalton, who would go on to lead others, who would pass on lessons learned, who would build on the foundation she was helping to create. That was legacy. Not medals or plaques or memorial walls. Lives touched, standards set, examples given. Sunday she spent packing her personal gear and preparing for the transition to Company XO. The position came with more responsibility, less direct leadership, more staff work, and less time with soldiers. It was the natural progression for junior officers, but it felt like a step away from what she loved most about being in the Army. Her phone rang. Unknown number, Virginia area code. Lieutenant Brennan? Lieutenant, this is Colonel Sandra Mitchell from Human Resources Command. I'm calling about a position that's opened up. We're looking for a female infantry officer with range air tab and combat experience to serve as an instructor at the Infantry Basic Officer Leader course. Your name came up based on your JRTC performance and recommendations from your chain of command. Cassidy sat down. An instructor position, ma'am. Teaching brand new infantry lieutenants how to lead platoons. Normally we don't pull officers this junior, but you've demonstrated exceptional tactical proficiency and leadership. Plus, having a female Ranger Tab combat veteran as an instructor sends an important message about the future of the infantry branch. Can I think about it, ma'am? You've got 72 hours. After that, the position goes to someone else. I'll send you the details via email. But Lieutenant, I'll be honest, this is the kind of assignment that accelerates careers. Teaching at Abong puts you in front of every new infantry officer in the Army. That visibility matters. After the call ended, Cassidy sat on her bed, staring at nothing. an instructor position at Fort Benning, Georgia, teaching new lieutenants, shaping the next generation of infantry leaders. It was an honor. It was also leaving Fort Campbell, leaving Alpha Company, leaving the soldiers she'd just spent 6 weeks building into a cohesive team. She didn't know what to do. Monday morning, 0800 hours, Captain Ashford's office. Cassidy stood at attention in her dress uniform, blue coat with brass buttons, infantry branch insignia on her lapels, awards, and badges on her chest. "At ease, Lieutenant. Have a seat." She sat. Ashford looked at her across his desk, expression unreadable. "I'm going to be direct. You've done exceptional work with 2nd Platoon. Your JRTC performance was outstanding. Your ability to turn Maddox from an antagonist into an ally was textbook leadership. I'm moving you to Company XO effective immediately." "Yes, sir. But there's something else. I got a call from HRC about an instructor position at IBOLC. They want you for it. Normally I'd fight to keep you because you're a strong officer and I need strong officers. But this is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come around often. My recommendation is that you take it." "Sir, I just built 2nd Platoon into something functional. Walking away from them feels like abandoning what I started. Leadership is about building things and handing them to the next generation. Your father understood that. He trained officers who went on to become battalion and brigade commanders. His legacy isn't just what he did personally, it's what his subordinates did because he taught them well." Ashford leaned forward. "You've trained Maddox. You've set standards for 2nd Platoon. Now you have a chance to teach hundreds of new infantry officers those same lessons. That's force multiplication, Lieutenant. That's how you create change that outlasts your personal command time." "When would I have to report?" 60 days. Enough time to transition the XO position and out-process from Campbell. I'll support whatever decision you make, but my professional advice is to take it." The awards formation happened at 0900 hours on the battalion parade field. 600 soldiers in dress uniform, flags flying, spring sun burning off morning fog. The battalion commander stood at the front with a small table covered in certificates and medals. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison addressed the formation. "We just completed one of the most successful JRTC rotations this battalion has had in 5 years. Multiple platoons earned superior ratings, but one platoon stood above the rest. 2nd Platoon Alpha Company earned 1st place in the company and 2nd place in the battalion. Their performance represents the standard we expect from all our units." He called Cassidy forward. She marched to the front, stood at attention. "First Lieutenant Cassidy Brennan for exceptional leadership during JRTC Rotation 24-06. I'm awarding you the Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device. Your tactical judgment during the final raid, particularly your identification of the suicide vest threat, prevented catastrophic casualties. Your command and control during complex operations under pressure exemplifies the standards of infantry leadership we demand." He pinned the medal on her chest, shook her hand. The formation applauded. Then he called Maddox forward. "Showdowns. Staff Sergeant Rhett Maddox for exceptional performance of duty during JRTC Rotation 24-06. I'm awarding you the Army Commendation Medal. Your assumption of tactical command when your platoon leader became a simulated casualty demonstrated outstanding NCO leadership. Effective immediately, you're promoted to Sergeant First Class and assigned as 2nd Platoon's Platoon Sergeant." Harrison pinned Sergeant First Class rank on Maddox's shoulders. More applause. After the ceremony, Maddox found Cassidy. "Ma'am, I heard about the instructor position. You should take it." "I just got 2nd Platoon functional. How can I leave now?" "Because you taught me how to maintain what you build. Because you set standards I can enforce. Because you gave me tools I didn't have before." Maddox stood straighter. 6 weeks ago, I thought you were just another academy graduate writing her father's name. You proved me wrong by being competent and demanding and never backing down. Now you have a chance to teach that to hundreds of new lieutenants. Don't waste it staying here to babysit a platoon that doesn't need babysitting anymore." "When did you become wise, Sergeant First Class?" "When I stopped being bitter and started paying attention to good leadership." That evening, Cassidy called her mother, explained the instructor position, asked for advice she wasn't sure she wanted. What would Dad have done? Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Your father struggled with this exact decision. He got offered an instructor position at Ranger School when you were 5, turned it down because he didn't want to leave his battalion. Later, he regretted it, said he could have influenced hundreds of Rangers instead of just one battalion, said he chose comfort over impact. So I should take it. I think you should ask yourself what kind of leader you want to be. One who builds one excellent platoon, or one who teaches hundreds of officers how to build excellent platoons. Both are valuable, but one has a bigger ripple effect. After the call, Cassidy walked to the battalion headquarters building, found the memorial pole with her father's plaque, traced his name with her finger like she'd done 100 times before. "What would you do, Dad?" The answer came from her own memory. His voice from an old home video teaching her about leadership when she was 7 years old. The best leaders multiply themselves by teaching others. One great leader can influence thousands of soldiers through the officers they train. She pulled out her phone and called Colonel Mitchell at HRC. "Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Brennan. I accept the instructor position." The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of transition planning and out-processing. Cassidy trained her replacement as Company XO, a lieutenant named Peterson, who just finished his platoon leader time. She watched Maddox take over 2nd Platoon and saw him implement the standards she'd set, maintaining the culture she'd built. She wrote recommendation letters for 3 soldiers who wanted to become officers, including Dalton. She conducted final counseling sessions with her squad leaders. She packed her personal gear and prepared to leave Fort Campbell for Fort Benning, Georgia. First Sergeant Kowalski found her on her last day sitting in her empty barracks room with nothing left but memories. "You ready for this?" "I don't know. Feels like I'm abandoning what I started." "You're not abandoning anything. You're expanding your influence. Your father would understand that." Kowalski sat down on the floor next to her. "Can I tell you something about the day your father died?" "You already told me about the IED." "Not about that. About what he said the night before. We were doing vehicle maintenance, just the 2 of us working on a Humvee that had electrical problems. He talked about you, said you were the smartest kid he'd ever known, said he worried you'd feel pressured to join the Army because of him. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd find you someday and tell you that he wanted you to choose your own path." Kowalski's voice got rough. "I failed that promise for 20 years. Couldn't figure out how to approach you. But watching you these last 2 months, I realized something. You did choose your own path. It just happened to look like his because you're both cut from the same cloth, both driven by duty and service, both willing to sacrifice comfort for impact. He'd be proud of you, Cassidy, not because you followed his path, because you made it your own." The going away event happened Friday evening at the company bar. Alpha Company gathered to send off their XO. Soldiers told stories, made jokes, presented her with a plaque commemorating her time with 2nd Platoon. Maddox stood up to give a speech. "6 weeks ago, I thought Lieutenant Brennan was just another officer who didn't belong in infantry. I was wrong. She proved her competence through action, earned respect through performance, and taught me that leadership isn't about gender or background. It's about meeting standards and taking care of soldiers." He raised his beer. "To Lieutenant Brennan. May she teach hundreds of new lieutenants to be half as good as she is, because half as good is still better than most." Everyone drank. Cassidy felt tears threaten, but held them back. When the event ended and soldiers filtered out, Maddox approached her privately. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something. That first day at the motor pool when I said your father earned the uniform and you were just wearing it, that was the worst thing I've ever said to another soldier. You didn't just earn that uniform, you earned the right to wear it with pride. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." Apology accepted, Sergeant First Class, and thank you for becoming the NCO 2nd Platoon needs. Learn from the best, ma'am. Saturday morning, Cassidy loaded her car with everything she owned, not much after 6 years in the Army and a lifetime of moving from base to base. Clothes, books, laptop, and one frame photo of her father that had followed her from Fort Bragg to West Point to Fort Campbell and now to Fort Benning. She stood in the Alpha Company parking lot looking at the building where she'd spent the last 2 months building something she was proud of. Felt the weight of transition, of endings and new beginnings, of closing one chapter so another could open. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dalton. "Just got accepted to OCS. Thanks for the recommendation, ma'am. I'm going to be an infantry officer because you showed me it was possible. Cassidy smiled through tears she didn't bother to hide. This was why the instructor position mattered. Not because of personal career advancement, because teaching junior officers meant influencing thousands of soldiers those officers would eventually lead. Ripple effects, legacy, building something that outlasted your personal command time. She got in her car and drove south toward Georgia, toward Fort Benning, toward a new assignment that terrified and excited her in equal measure. The drive took 6 hours through Tennessee and Alabama, watching the landscape change from Kentucky hills to Georgia pine forests. She arrived at Fort Benning at 1800 hours, checked into her new quarters, and looked around at another sparse room that would become home for the next few years. Unpacked her bags, set up her father's photo on the nightstand, laid out her uniform for Monday morning when she'd report to the infantry school and begin her new assignment. That night she couldn't sleep. Lay in bed thinking about 2nd Platoon, wondering if they'd maintain the standards she'd set, hoping Maddox would be the leader they deserved, trusting that what she'd built would survive without her. Her phone rang at 2300 hours. Maddox, ma'am, sorry to call late. Just wanted you to know 2nd Platoon ran a squad attack drill today. New platoon leader was there watching. We executed it flawlessly. Everything you taught us we remembered. You built something that's going to last, ma'am. Thank you for telling me that, Sergeant First Class. Take care of them. Roger that. And ma'am, good luck at IBOLC. Those new lieutenants don't know how lucky they are. After the call ended, Cassidy finally fell asleep knowing that she'd made the right choice. Fort Campbell was the past. Fort Benning was the future. And somewhere in between was the present moment where she was exactly where she needed to be. Monday morning, 0800 hours. Cassidy reported to the infantry school headquarters building wearing her dress uniform, awards and badges gleaming on her chest. The commandant's office was on the 3rd floor walls, covered with photos of every infantry class that had graduated since 1950. Colonel James Bradford, 55 years old, Ranger, tabbed 4 combat deployments, looked at her across his desk. Lieutenant Brennan, welcome to the infantry school. I've read your evaluations from JRTC. Outstanding performance. Exactly the kind of officer we need instructing our new lieutenants. Thank you, sir. You'll be teaching small unit tactics and leadership in the Infantry Basic Officer Leader course. Classes of 40 to 50 new lieutenants, all of them fresh from their basic branches, all of them thinking they know more than they do. Your job is to teach them humility and competence in equal measure. He leaned forward. You're also going to face something unique. You're a female infantry officer with Ranger tab and combat experience. Some of these new lieutenants are going to question your credibility simply because of your gender. How you handle that will determine whether you succeed or fail as an instructor. I understand, sir. I've dealt with skepticism before. I know you have. That's why you're here. Show these new officers that competence has no gender. Teach them the lessons you learned at Fort Campbell and JRTC. Make them better leaders than they would have been without you. Yes, sir. Your first class starts Wednesday. You've got 2 days to prepare. Don't waste them. The first class assembled Wednesday morning at 7:30 hours. 42 new infantry lieutenants, all male, fresh from their basic courses, and all of them looking at Cassidy with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. She stood at the front of the classroom in combat uniform, her Ranger tab and combat patch, visible, her awards understated but present. Let them look, let them wonder. Then she began. Good morning, I'm Lieutenant Cassidy Brennan. I'll be your primary instructor for small unit tactics and leadership. Before we start, let me establish some facts. I'm a Ranger School graduate. I deployed to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne and led soldiers in combat. I just finished 2 months at Fort Campbell, where my platoon earned first place in the company and second in the battalion at JRTC. She paused. Let that sink in. Some of you are wondering if a female officer can teach you anything about infantry leadership. That's fine. You're entitled to your skepticism, but by the end of this course, you're going to understand that leadership isn't about gender or physical strength. It's about tactical competence, decision-making under pressure, and taking care of soldiers. If you can't learn those lessons from me, you won't learn them from anyone. One lieutenant raised his hand. Young, cocky, probably a college athlete. Ma'am, with respect, How can you teach us about physical standards when women have different standards than men? Good question. First, I don't have different standards. I meet the same ones you do. Second, if you think leadership is just about physical fitness, you're going to fail as a platoon leader. Physical fitness matters, but tactical judgment matters more. Decision-making under pressure matters more. Building trust with your NCOs matters more. I can teach you those things if you're willing to learn. Yes, ma'am. She spent the next 4 hours teaching patrol planning procedures using examples from her own experience at JRTC. Showed them how to analyze terrain, how to develop courses of action, how to brief their plan in a way that gave subordinates clear guidance without micromanaging execution. At 1200 hours, she dismissed them for lunch. Half the class looked engaged, the other half still skeptical. She'd won over harder audiences than this. The weeks turned into months. Cassidy taught 6 classes through the spring and summer. Each one 40 to 50 new lieutenants, all of them learning small unit tactics and leadership from an officer who'd proven herself in the same situations that they'd eventually face. Some classes were receptive from day one. Others took longer to accept that a female officer with combat experience had something valuable to teach. But by the end of each course, every class had come around. Because she didn't just lecture theory, she taught practical lessons from real experience. She taught them about the importance of checking equipment, personally using the story of finding defective radios before the Fort Campbell shakedown exercise. Taught them about building trust with skeptical NCOs, using Maddox as an example of how patience and competence could convert antagonists into allies. Taught them about making decisions under pressure, using the JRTC suicide vest scenario to illustrate how tactical judgment could prevent catastrophic casualties. Taught them about maintaining command and control while wounded, using her own experience of being marked as a casualty and continuing to lead by radio. Every lesson grounded in reality. Every example taken from situations she'd actually faced. Every piece of advice proven through experience rather than theory. By October, 6 months into her instructor assignment, Cassidy had taught nearly 300 new infantry officers, 300 lieutenants who'd gone to their first assignments with lessons learned from her experience. 300 ripples spreading through the force, influencing thousands of soldiers those lieutenants would eventually lead. That was legacy, not personal command time, but force multiplication through teaching. One Friday afternoon in late October, Cassidy received a surprise visitor. First Sergeant Kowalski, now retired from the Army, after 35 years of service, drove to Fort Benning to see her. They sat in her small office in the infantry school building, catching up on news from Fort Campbell and Alpha Company. Second platoon is still the top-rated platoon in the company, Kowalski said. Maddox runs it the way you taught him. High standards, competent leadership soldiers who trust their chain of command. What you built lasted. That's good to hear. But I didn't drive 5 hours just to give you status updates. I came to give you something. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This came to Alpha Company, addressed to you, forwarded from Fort Campbell. You should read it. Cassidy opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from Specialist Emma Dalton, now Officer Candidate Dalton, at Fort Benning's OCS course. Ma'am, I'm writing to thank you for the recommendation letter that got me accepted to OCS. More importantly, I wanted to thank you for showing me that female soldiers can lead with competence and earn respect through performance. I'm going to commission as an infantry officer next month because you proved it was possible. I hope someday I can be half the leader you are. Cassidy set the letter down, feeling emotion rise in her throat. That's legacy, Kowalski said quietly. Not medals or rankings or evaluation reports. Lives touched, standards set, examples given. Your father influenced 14 soldiers who lived because of his sacrifice. You're influencing hundreds, maybe thousands. That's what it means to be better than he was. Not because you're more heroic, because you're multiplying your impact through teaching. After Kowalski left, Cassidy sat alone in her office thinking about ripple effects and legacy and what it meant to build something that outlasted your personal presence. Her father had built a reputation through 20 years of service and ultimate sacrifice. She was building something different but equally important. A generation of infantry officers who understood that competence had no gender, that leadership was about performance rather than politics, that meeting standards mattered more than meeting expectations. That evening, she walked to the National Infantry Museum on Fort Benning's main post. Found the Medal of Honor section where they kept citations and artifacts from recipients throughout history. Found her father's display. Colonel Garrett Brennan photo and dress uniform citation describing his actions in Fallujah, the medal itself behind glass. She stood there for a long time reading words she'd memorized 20 years ago, feeling different about them now than she had as a 9-year-old girl receiving a folded flag. Her father had led when it mattered most, had made the hard choice to run toward danger instead of away from it, had saved 14 lives at the cost of his own. She was leading too, different battlefield, different challenges, same commitment to service and sacrifice, and doing the right thing regardless of cost. A voice behind her. Lieutenant Brennan, she turned. Young officer, First Lieutenant, Bars Ranger Tab Infantry Branch Insignia, one of her former students from her second class at IBOLC. Sir, she said, recognizing him. Lieutenant Morrison, right? Yes, ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you. I took over my platoon at the 101st 3 months ago. Used everything you taught us. My platoon just finished top ratings at a gunnery qualification because I remembered your lesson about checking equipment personally and building trust with NCOs. Your teaching made a real difference. After he left, Cassidy stood looking at her father's display and understood something fundamental. Legacy wasn't about being remembered. It was about influencing people who influenced others, who influenced still others, creating ripples that spread beyond anything one person could accomplish alone. Her father had created ripples through 14 saved lives. She was creating ripples through hundreds of taught officers. Together, their combined influence touched thousands of soldiers across the Army. That was what it meant to serve. Not personal glory or recognition, impact that outlasted presence. December brought the holiday break and a chance to visit home. Cassidy drove north to North Carolina, where her mother and stepfather had retired. Pulled into the driveway of their small house outside Fort Bragg, feeling like the 9-year-old girl who'd lived here when 2 officers in dress blues knocked on the door. Her mother met her at the door with tears and hugs. Look at you, Captain's Bars. When did that happen? Last week, early promotion based on IBOL performance. Her stepfather, Robert, stood behind her mother, recovered fully from his heart attack, looking healthy and proud. Captain Brennan has a nice ring to it. They sat in the living room catching up on 6 months of news. Cassidy talked about teaching at IBOLC, about the hundreds of lieutenants she'd instructed about building legacy through force multiplication rather than personal command. Her mother pulled out a box from the closet. I've been saving these for you. Your father's personal effects from his final deployment. I couldn't give them to you when you were 9. Wasn't ready, but you're ready now. Inside the box, his dog tags, his combat knife, his ranger scroll, photos from Iraq, letters he'd written, but never sent, a journal documenting his thoughts about leadership and sacrifice and what it meant to be worth following. Cassidy spent the evening reading her father's journal, understanding him as an adult rather than a daughter's idealized memory. He'd struggled with doubt, questioned his decisions, worried about being good enough, made mistakes and tried to learn from them. He'd been human, flawed, doing his best in impossible situations, just like her. That night, she wrote in her own journal, starting a tradition her father had kept, documenting lessons learned, mistakes made, thoughts about leadership and service, and what it meant to build something worth building. I spent 20 years trying to be worthy of Dad's legacy. But I understand now that legacy isn't about being worthy. It's about being useful, teaching others, multiplying impact, building something that outlasts personal presence. I'm not Dad's shadow anymore. I'm my own light, and that's enough. Christmas morning, her mother gave her a gift, small box carefully wrapped. Inside, her father's Medal of Honor, the actual medal rather than the display copy. He wanted you to have this, her mother said. Left instructions in his will. Said when you made captain, I should give it to you, not to pressure you, just to remind you that serving with honor is its own reward regardless of recognition. Cassidy held the medal in her hands, feeling the weight of it, understanding that the weight wasn't burden, but foundation. Her father had earned this through ultimate sacrifice. She was earning her own legacy through daily service and multiplication of impact. Different paths, same commitment. She returned to Fort Benning in January for spring semester classes. 3 more months of teaching new lieutenants. 3 more classes of 40 to 50 officers learning small unit tactics and leadership from someone who'd proven herself in the same situations they'd eventually face. By March, she'd taught nearly 500 new infantry officers, 500 lieutenants carrying out her lessons to platoons across the Army, 500 ripples spreading through the force. One Wednesday afternoon, she received a call from Captain Ashford at Fort Campbell. "Captain Brennan, I wanted to give you an update. Second Platoon just won the battalion's top rating in an annual training. Sergeant First Class Maddox credits the standards you set. Says you built a culture of excellence that's still driving performance 6 months after you left." "That's outstanding news, sir. Thank you for telling me. But there's something else. One of your former soldiers now, Officer Candidate Dalton, is about to commission. She requested you present her commissioning certificate. I thought you'd want to know." 3 weeks later, Cassidy stood at Fort Benning's OCS graduation ceremony, watching Emma Dalton receive her commission as a second lieutenant, watched her take the oath of office, accepting responsibility for leading soldiers and defending the Constitution. After the ceremony, Dalton found her. "Ma'am, thank you for coming. I wanted you here because you're the reason I'm commissioning as an infantry officer. You showed me it was possible. You earned this, Dalton. I just showed you the path. You walked it yourself. What you built matters, ma'am. Not just for me, for every female soldier wondering if we belong in combat arms. You proved we do, and now it's my turn to prove it to the next generation." That evening, Cassidy sat in her quarters thinking about legacy and ripple effects and what it meant to build something that outlasted personal presence. She'd taught 500 officers. One of her former soldiers had just commissioned. Second Platoon at Fort Campbell was still performing at the top of their company based on standards she'd set 2 years ago. Her father had influenced 14 lives through one moment of sacrifice. She was influencing hundreds through daily service and teaching. Different impacts, equal value. She pulled out her father's journal and her own reading entries side by side. His thoughts about leadership from 20 years ago. Her thoughts about teaching from this morning. 2 generations of Brennans serving the Army, building legacy through different paths, but same commitment. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maddox. "Ma'am, Second Platoon sends their regards. Still the best platoon in Alpha Company. Standards you set are still the standards we maintain. Thank you for building something that lasted." Cassidy typed back, "Thank you for maintaining what we built together." 20 years she'd been carrying his shadow. Now she understood the shadow wasn't burden, but foundation. Something to build on rather than something to escape from. She was Captain Cassidy Brennan, daughter of Medal of Honor recipient Colonel Garrett Brennan, Ranger School graduate, combat veteran, infantry officer, instructor teaching hundreds of new leaders. She wasn't her father, didn't need to be. She was building her own legacy through her own service, multiplying impact through teaching, creating ripples that would spread through the Army for decades. That was enough. More than enough. Outside her window, Fort Benning was quiet under Georgia stars. Tomorrow she'd teach another class. Next week, another 40 officers would learn from her experience. Next month, more ripples would spread through the force. Her father had led from the front and paid the ultimate price. She was leading differently, but with equal impact, teaching others to lead so they could teach still others, creating multiplication effects that would outlast her personal presence by decades. The weight she'd carried for 20 years was finally gone. Not because she'd escaped the shadow, because she'd learned to stand in it and use it as foundation for building something of her own. Legacy wasn't about being remembered. It was about creating impact that outlasted presence. Her father understood that. Now she did too.